Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Modern Maze. Happy 2025. Happy to see you again. I hope everybody has had a beautiful start to the year and is doing well. Today's episode I'm really excited about. For me, it has been such a journey to understand how my contributions fit into making a regenerative planet that's socially just for everybody. Even as I journey through, making this podcast, networking, connecting with people, I've still been trying to find my space. I've been trying to understand, where is it exactly that I can provide value? And where is it that all of my skills, my knowledge, my experiences, where does that place me in this larger network or web of creating a better tomorrow? And my feeling, based on what I've asked you previously, is that this is not a common feeling. This is a common feeling, and that there is a shared sentiment with people who want to make a better tomorrow, but don't know how to begin. They don't know where to start, or how to leverage all of their previous experiences and skills and move into a role that more aligns with themselves and contributes to a better tomorrow and a better planet. So with all of this in mind, to help us dive into this and to discuss this, I have Adrian with me on the podcast today, which I'm very excited about. I'm very excited for this conversation. Hello, Adrian. Welcome to the Modern Maze. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Aria. Yeah, doing really well. I'm excited for the episode. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. It's my absolute pleasure. So I guess just based on what I said and this feeling of people maybe not being sure about where they fit into this larger web, how do you see that playing out? I should have probably just said from the start as well that Adrian is a network weaver, facilitator, and a social entrepreneur who's been working in this space for over a decade. And specifically, what's exciting for myself and for my viewers and for this platform is that he's created a system to create more clarity for people to understand how to contribute to a safe and equitable world. So just jumping off that, Adrian, how do we do this? How do people figure this out?
So yeah, I think starting from the name of this podcast, The Modern Maze, I think it's a very powerful metaphor to capture what's happening on our planet today. I think we're really facing these large, systemic issues of the climate crisis, a lack of integrity in political leadership, the loss of biodiversity. I could go on and on with this list. And just as I'm talking about it, what I feel in my body and maybe what you're feeling when you're listening is this sense of contraction. It's this sense of this is very overwhelming. It's it's not even we can't even address these things. Everything's just going to go to hell. And it's really a very daunting time to live in. And it can be very overwhelming and confusing. And then there's all of these distractions that kind of can keep us stuck running around the maze or in a hamster wheel of a corporate job, a job that doesn't really fulfill us, that doesn't really make us happy, where we don't really make a contribution to a more regenerative world. And if you're listening to this, maybe you are just coming out of school, you're looking to create a path for yourself. You want to, create a work for yourself that feels fulfilling, that feels, you have an impact, or you're in a career that doesn't really make you happy and you feel I really want to have a bigger impact. I want to be connected to these movements that really make a change, or you are already in this space of creating social impact, but you want to really refine a bit more what is your contribution. So I think those are a few challenges that we're gonna look at. And for myself, I've been working in this field, as you said, for 10 years, and that's not been this linear journey. It's really been this journey of facing big challenges and big problems and big questions in myself, and really like an ongoing inquiry and curiosity of like, where can I contribute with my talents, with my skills, and how can I collaborate with others? Because ultimately we won't make this change by ourselves, right? So that's why I basically created my own profession by combining different skills and different roles, and created this unique niche for myself. And reflecting on this process of the last 10 years, I started to distill kind of a system that can help you, if you're listening, to really generate a bit more clarity of like, where do you want to go with your life's work. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into this, and also to connect this to your experience, Arya, because I know that you're in this career transition yourself, and exploring where do you make your contribution.
Beautifully said. I mean, just off the top, I find it really admirable, actually, and inspiring at how you've been able to create a niche for yourself, and to feel in your heart and your body what feels true to you, to map out all of your different skills and capabilities and bring that all together. And I mean, I was in a corporate job for so long, and it really feels like sometimes I feel like we box a lot of our existence and what it means to be human into, these little segments. You must be in this job, you must go down this way, or you want to be this. And I think embracing the multitude of like colorful skills and experiences and strengths and weaknesses of each individual, and allowing them to map a role or a path or something that aligns fully with them is so important in today's time. So I think it's really important and beautiful work that you're doing. And yeah, it's an honor to talk about this. Like, everything that you said just really resonates with me. So yeah, really excited about this. And, I think about my friends, I think about people in these networks, and, they're so skilled, they're so creative, they care so much. So yeah, allowing them to see outside just these maybe traditional roles, or roles that are created and have a set path, I think is powerful to see that, yeah, you can create something that fits you 100%. Okay. And will also apply to me, which sounds great. Most of my listeners know about my journey, but we'll keep it light where we can as well. So we're not just talking about me, and we'll bring this up a level. So we will talk about how this affects you and how you can take this approach in your own career.
Yeah, exactly. And I think maybe we can talk a bit about the big picture, or the larger kind of process. And if you're listening to this, I'd love you to imagine this kind of hourglass shape. And just going with that metaphor for a moment, at the top of the hourglass, it's really like the sand is going down slowly. It's kind of distilling, and it's starting to go to the center. And this center is what, we can see as, this is your essential, your unique contribution. That's something that only you can bring to the world. It's not like a generic job description, but it's something that really makes you come alive. And as you said, Arya, at the beginning of the day, you feel the sense of purpose and the sense of direction. And from that kind of sense of purpose and clarity, it kind of then goes out. So it goes into the world, the hourglass is opening again. And then we're kind of really looking into, okay, how can you bring your talents, your skills to the world? So then we're talking about, your projects, your strategies, and so on. But I think kind of starting from the top of the hourglass, I think there's 3 key elements that we can look at. So the first, and I like to say this is coming from the inside out, this is your individual knowledge, your life experience, your skills, your talents. And what we're going to look at is, how do all of these bundle together in a couple of different roles? I found, if you map all your skills, you have this list of like 50 different skills, 100 different skills, it becomes very overwhelming. But if you look at it in terms of your roles, like, for example, being a facilitator, you can connect a lot of different skills to that role, and it becomes easier to make sense of it. So that's the kind of first part, just big picture. Then the second part we're going to look at is really the macro situation. So obviously there's a lot of different wicked problems in the world. We've mentioned a couple, the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, poverty. And even though you might want to focus on all of them, sometimes it's also good to focus on, one, two, three of them and find, what problems are really speaking to you and on what scale are you going to address it, like the local level, the global level, bioregional level, or a couple of different kind of levels. And then once we have the individual and the systemic problems, we can then look into this kind of middle ground, which is all about collaboration. It's about doing things together, and it's about finding networks and social movements or organizations that resonate with you, that you can contribute to because of your individual skills, and that address these larger systemic issues that you really care about. So here we're going to talk about, how to find your people, how to start collaborating with others in a way that then creates synergies between all of your different skills. So that's really the top of the hourglass: individual contribution, the large systemic issues, and then who are you working with? And then that kind of funnels into this unique niche, and then you can really kind of create this statement of, like, I am offering these roles to address these larger issues and so on. And we can go into that a bit more deeply. And and then it goes into how do we then realize it and make it practical, make it strategic. And I think the last point to mention here is we want to make this podcast really tactical, and really see in each of those categories what kinds of challenges can you encounter, what are some tips, from my experience, but then also really going through it with you, Arya, I think can really ground it a bit more in the real world.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good to me. I like the analogy of the hourglass, and the three elements is our individual knowledge, skills, the larger systemic problems that you resonate with, which 2 to 3 is, I think we've talked about this before, but often it feels like there's so much going on in the world. And me personally, I've found it hard to really, filter it out and attach myself to just a couple, which has led to burnout and, savior complex. And so my energies are all over the place and I haven't been able to focus. So the connecting to a few larger systemic problems, I feel, is very valuable, and then finding your place. And that leads to your unique niche. Okay, perfect. Great. So would we like to start with, I guess, the first step? So mapping your talents, skills, and knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. So this kind of relates to, all of your life experience. And, if you're a bit younger, maybe this is like what you did in your friend circle. I remember, back in my youth, when I went to school, I always enjoyed connecting people. Like back then it was about, going to the park or doing some fun things together, but that was like a talent that I had. And then I kind of became a weaver, a connector of, people. But now I do that on a strategic level where I connect a lot of different organizations, right? So if you don't have this kind of strong skill set yet, kind of go with your inclinations. But if you already, you've worked in a couple of jobs, you already have a better sense of like, what is it that you're naturally good at. And as I mentioned before, I think what's helpful to not make this so overwhelming is to look at a couple of different specific roles. Because again, if you just look at the skills and all the knowledge that you have, it becomes very, very big. And I think just as an example, so the one role from my side is to be a weaver. I've kind of mentioned that already. And then underneath that, there's a lot of different kinds of practices, So one thing, again, the metaphor with weaving is connecting people. So I always look at what are people working on, what are they interested in, how can I connect them? But then it's also about, facilitating spaces where people can feel this sense of community, the sense of belonging, where they can build relationships. And then there's also very strategic skills that I need of just coordinating and bringing a lot of people into a room together, right? So those are just some examples. And I think to anchor that further, I'd love for you, Arya, to share a bit. You have these 4 main roles, and 2 of which I think you're just leaning into. I think maybe you can first map that out and share a bit more about, where you're at in your process.
Okay, sounds great. So and to give people context here, Adrian asked me to reflect upon the structure that he's mapped out here, and for me to have a brief think and reflection about it myself. So what I'm going to say now and share in this episode are things that I shared with Adrian a little while ago. So I took some time to really think about this. So when I'm thinking about my roles, is that your question? What roles I've mapped out to myself? Yep. So I mapped up 4 roles. The first one, which is being primarily through the form of this podcast, is storyteller. So I connect ideas, people to tell stories and inspire new ways of belonging in the world. My second role is collaborator. So I really do thrive in co-creation, seeking networks and communities to build and learn together. My third role, which I've been stepping more into, is guide. So whether through yoga, nature-based workshops, or storytelling, I help others reconnect with their bodies, the earth, and that sense of belonging. And the final one that I had here was strategic thinker. So with a background in strategy and business transformation, I can analyze complex systems and problems and identify leverage points and ways to optimize systems. So those were the 4 big roles that I had come up with.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think those are all very powerful roles. And now, you can imagine them kind of sitting on a piece of paper, 4 kinds of bubbles. And what we want to do now is we want to start drawing connections. So this is really about, seeing things as the interconnected whole, because your unique contribution is in the center. Like, it encapsulates all of these different roles and skills and combines them in new and creative ways. So this is where you really create your innovative approach, because nobody has your life experience. And I think one tip here, and what we can do now, is like the sense of zooming in and zooming out. So sometimes we really want to see the big picture and how everything connects. Sometimes we want to zoom in to see a lot more detail. So I think the next step I'd like to invite you into is kind of just picking 2 roles, and maybe pick the ones that feel a bit further apart, like maybe the storyteller and the strategic thinker. I'm kind of seeing those are a bit more apart, right? But now, explore a bit, how do those come together? Like, what are some kind of synergies and overlaps between these different roles, and how can you creatively combine them? And then we're going to zoom out again, okay? But for this kind of zooming in, how would you connect the storyteller and the strategic thinker?
Storyteller and strategic thinker. So with storytelling, especially if it's about a specific issue going on in the world, or a particular problem I want to talk about, that usually takes a lot of critical analysis, I would say, and research. And especially in today's time, it's pretty important to do your research and to disseminate what has an agenda, what's true, what's false, and to also have the ability to come up with your own opinion based on the facts, as opposed to what's being told to you. I feel like that is pretty aligned with my strategic thinking, because in my roles, it was all about getting information from people or systems or data, and using all of those different bits of knowledge to combine them into an insight, or a leverage point to tackle or to improve. So just off the top of my head, that's sort of one way that I see them linking. Like, I would, if I had to boil it down, it would probably be like identifying problems, root causes, and leverage points for change, whether it be in an organization or in the world.
Yeah, No, and just as you're sharing, I find it inspiring, to see how you already have a sense of the connection. But like I was thinking of this just came to me, like of what
Mm,
about strategy as story? So if you're working with a collective, with a community, I think that community has a certain story. Like, who are we? What problem are we addressing? Where do we want to go? What kind of transformation do we
mm,
want to, accomplish? So there's this narrative and this story and this flow of people kind of coming together and wanting to accomplish something together. Um,
mm,
and that can be like a strategic frame, right? And you can
mm,
host strategic processes where you need to make tough decisions together through this storytelling lens. And for example, if like a crisis is coming up and there's like a big obstacle, then in that situation you can ask the group, like, what story do we want to choose? Like, do we want to choose that now everything is kind of going downhill, or do we want to choose another narrative that gets us to the outcomes and the impacts that we want to accomplish? So just, an impulse of,
mm,
storytelling and strategy coming together, strategy as story. And I think this is now one example where we kind of zoomed in, we look at two different roles. And if you're listening to this, what you can do just in a journal, draw out all of your core roles, and then draw these lines of connection and look into each of them deeply, like with more nuance, and really get to a higher level of detail, just like we did now with this example of, the storytelling and the strategic thinker. And then the more you do that, the more you go into detail, the more you're going to see, there's a bigger picture that's emerging. So you're going to see, okay, this connects to this and this connects to this. So it's like a bit of a alchemy and like a bit of experimentation. And I think, Arya, just what's your sense around your big picture? So you have those four core roles. Do you feel like there is something that kind of holds them all together, where you feel like, okay, this is where it all comes together in this unique way?
mm. I'm just trying to feel into that. So, I'm just looking at all of this story. I feel like a lot, the storyteller, collaborator, guide, I feel like in the middle is something about, like leading or teaching in some form. Like, I think with the storytelling, I feel like that's part of it. Guide, collaborator is important for that. And that's something that I have been feeling myself lean into, especially as I look to design workshops and with this podcast as well. Yeah, to me, that kind of feels like the middle, and yeah, to create something and to, yeah, guide, lead, to begin discussions and to build something kind of feels like where all the Venns combine, yeah, into that.
Great. And how does that, like, just speaking those words, like, of seeing all of your talents and roles kind of come together, how does that feel? Like, do you have like some physical sensations? Do you have some feelings that are coming up?
Hmm. It feels empowering to, I guess, have a space where I can see all of these skills and see how interconnected they all actually are. And it feels true. It just feels true actually when I feel it. Like it feels natural, and like it just resonates with me. Like even as I speak the words, it just feels right. So yeah, it feels right in my heart, feels right in my body. And it feels natural. It feels like that's what I'm gravitating towards. And yeah, it feels nice.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And if you're listening to this, I think this is really, what Arya just felt is like, I feel like that's the feeling behind this. So, I mean, the exercise that we just did, mapping your roles, like looking at the connections, sometimes that can become a bit heady, like it can become a bit analytical. So I think one essential tip here is also use your mind and use your head, but then come back also to your heart and to your body. So what just happened, right? Like it feels natural for you It feels aligned. It feels nice. It feels good. It's a good sensation. Like things are coming together, right? So if you're doing this exercise at home, if you're listening, also, tap into your sensations, into your feelings, and ultimately this process should get you closer to your essence, to, like your sense of purpose, your sense of direction. And that's something that's very, personal and enriching and valuable for our own lives to have more clarity on this. So I think here the tip would be, use the analytical mind, but also go beyond it and take these questions on a walk, like it's not that just, you sit down on a journal and you map it all out. Take it into nature, reflect ongoingly, and really sense, and also let it evolve over time. I mean, one thing we didn't talk so much about, but I think there were two roles that you mentioned that you want to lean into more, like new skill sets that you want to learn. So I think mapping out all of your roles and skills can then also help you to identify, like, where do you want to grow? Like, is there like another role that really fits into this? Like another client of mine, she had 4 roles mapped out. And then at some point she realized like, I'm also doing this kind of coaching and guiding others. Like that's what I do a lot. And then I also do a lot more kind of fundraising and resource gathering. And we identified that those are, additional skill sets that she again wants to bring into her work a lot more. So I think, use the mapping of all the roles and skills, then weave them together, and then look at the big picture and see like, where is it that I want to grow? What kinds of new skills can I weave into this tapestry?
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said, and love how we brought it back to the body. Because even when you asked me that, I really had to take a step back and go, wow, how do I actually feel about it? Which is so important when we're talking about this and, building a new life, building a new career and path for you, is how does it feel in your body and how does it align to you? So beautifully said. Is that all for our first section here? Is there anything else we would like to go through?
No, I think for now it's good, because again, this is not like this individualistic exercise. It's not about like, I'm going to find my passion and then I'm just going to, do the things that I like. But it's about reflecting on what you can bring to the larger, movements that are, working towards a regenerative world, and how can you kind of contribute to addressing some of the pressing problems that we're facing in the world. So I think now we're kind of zooming out from the individual all the way to the macro, like the really high level kind of systemic issues. And I think there's 2 main things that I want to talk to. The first one is like, if we look at these larger systems, obviously they're all interconnected, right? And we want to create approaches that honor that interconnection. Because like a big problem in the world is this kind of what a lot of people have called, the story of separation, that we're always boxing things up and like, this is that and this is that. So what you've mentioned before, right? So all of these systems are ultimately interconnected, but sometimes it also helps to not be so overwhelmed, to kind of focus a bit more and make a conscious decision. And I see some friends, for example. So let me give a couple of examples. There's Rob. He's working very focused on biodiversity and climate change in the Amazon rainforest, like that bioregion. So, the fields, the kind of topics that he's looking at is biodiversity, is how do we, connect more with the land. He's collaborating with indigenous communities there. So that's kind of like the fields, the topics of the system. Yeah. So just in that example of, my friend working in the rainforest, what you want to do is kind of focus on what is the field or the area of the system that you're intervening in. So in that example, it's a lot about biodiversity. It's about indigenous rights. It's about decolonization. Those are the fields that he's focusing on. But for you, that might be, health and well-being, or youth empowerment, or poverty. There's these kind of different topics and larger systems that you can focus on. Education, right? And then the other piece is like the scale or the level on which you're working, which is in the case of Rob, is working really in this kind of bioregion of the Amazon. But other people are working hyper local, just in their community. So they have a community space, and that's what they're doing. Other people, like also myself, like I work more on a global level, right, connecting a lot of different movements. Other people work more on a national level, and here you don't have to choose like one scale. Like I think some people I see are also connecting different scales. So maybe they have like this hyper local project, but then they're also kind of sharing that out, through videos and through writings, and they have this kind of global piece of their work. So yeah, I think that's in terms of the larger systems having topic areas, and then also like the different scales. So Arya, I'd love to hear from you. I know you're kind of moving back to Melbourne, to Australia. Like what is your like the systemic issues that you are really care about?
If I had to pick, which even that exercise and really feeling in my body, what is those issues that I resonate with the most and feel like I can make an impact or I want to work in. For me, one of them is the issue of consumption and maybe related to circular economy. So to me, that's something that feels really strong within me, and something that I am very passionate about is, overconsumption and the wasteful economy. So that's one. And then the second one is, I would say, just environmental damage. And for me, overconsumption feels like a more systemic thing that I want to lean towards when I think about it. Like I feel drawn to the scale of that because it's such a complex, massive issue. When I feel into the environmental protection, that feels more local for me. Particularly when I think about Australia, I have quite a strong connection to the Australian landscape and the wildlife and just the nature there. So of course, I'd like to do it for the whole world. But when I think about environmental protection, to me, that feels more local. So I guess those are the two issues. And yeah, it's interesting even thinking about at what different scales I feel drawn to or want to operate in.
For sharing that. And I think what I'm hearing is like this, making a choice doesn't feel good. And I think there's also pathways to work on like a lot of different or all different systems. That's actually the path that I chose. But then, what I'm focusing on is more how do we collaborate across different communities and networks? How do we make sense of all of these issues in a more systemic and interconnected way? So I think that's also like a path, and you don't have to constrict yourself. If you're feeling that it's, you want to work across all these systems, then it's about finding, are there any kind of meta skills or meta contributions that you can make that kind of ripples into different systems? And I think, then in terms of your focus, the consumption, which is more local, and then generally like environmental protection, which feels more global, you can start doing the same thing that we did with the roles and the skills, which is kind of mapping out the system. There's a lot of materials on this, but basically you want to start understanding these issues in a deeper way. Like what are some of the behaviors, some of the mindsets and worldviews, for example, that influence consumption in Australia, so you also want to map out all of these different elements and identify what are some key points within these systems where you can focus on and where you can make the biggest difference. And one thing I want to also say is that, this is not like a choice that you make for life and you just say now like, oh, these are the systems that I'm focusing on. I think a lot of that is also pretty project dependent. So, in 1 or 2 years or just in a couple of weeks, there might be an opportunity coming in, which fits perfectly to all of your skills. And then, but it's in a different field, like it's in, mental well-being of youth, but it still kind of sparks something in you. So I think staying open and flexible and dynamic with these topics is good, but also, looking into what are some of the issues that you really care about a lot and understanding these issues better, doing research, seeing like how these problems keep perpetuating themselves, understanding it on a deeper level is also pretty important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a few great points here. I think just reflecting on yourself, that the fact that you don't have to pick and choose, that you can work across the breadth of these issues, but rather focus on one specific capability or part of the problem. So in your case, it's about this network weaving and finding your unique contribution and the social side of things. So I think that's a really good point to make. And then as well for myself, mapping out the specific things in consumption that are driving the overconsumption problems to get a better sense of the problem myself and where to fit in. Because again, and I think as well for me, sometimes I have struggled when I think about going back to Melbourne and what is the role that I want to be in, sometimes I find myself already boxing myself and being like, no, I'd only work for an organization that tackles this problem, or, I'm not interested as much in maybe working in mental health. And so I think it's a really good call out, and maybe again, where we bring the body back in and a moment where we can see where these roles and these opportunities, rather than, we want to think about this, we want to be in the head, but also taking those moments to feel in the body if it really resonates and if it aligns. And I mean, my guess is that so many more roles and opportunities align with me, actually, rather than just thinking about, what are these specific issues that I want to work on. So a couple of really good points there. And I guess maybe I'm just kind of curious as to your process. Like before you picked the role that you're in now, was there a particular systemic problem that you wanted to engage with? Or I'm just kind of curious as to how your journey was to where you are right now.
Yeah. No, I think, what I mentioned at the beginning, like my youth, I always had this impulse to bring different people together and, different friend circles and like, hey, let's do something cool together. Let's create something. I mean, obviously that was a different context. And then I went to do my studies. And at some point I came across this term of network weaver, which June Holly wrote a lot about, but it's really not a new idea. I think a lot of indigenous communities and cultures have always, talked about everything is interdependent. We're connected to the land. And then I had this really visceral moment of like, this makes so much sense. Like this role makes so much sense for me. And then it was like this ongoing process of, learning, reading, researching, looking into the world. And again, for me, I think what I've started to focus on is more of these, what are the kinds of skill sets and capacities that people need to do deep systemic change work? So like, how can we build skills to come together in communities, in networks and movements to, collaboratively address these big issues? So I think from my side, I also didn't really choose one particular issue. I think the issue that I'm focusing on is like, how are we co-creating? How are we collaborating? And how are we addressing these issues? Like, I think that's more of the issue. So it doesn't I think reframing a bit what I said before, like it can be a topic in like a specific system, like health, poverty, so on, but it can also be like another kind of problem that relates more to, how we're doing things. And I think that's kind of like the path that I chose for myself. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Amazing. Glad to hear your story, and thank you for sharing. So now, somebody from this audience, in this example, myself. So now we've mapped out our individual knowledge, skills, and roles. We've now aligned ourselves. Again, this is flexible, moving, shifting, doesn't have to be forever, but we've now aligned ourselves to a few systemic problems that we resonate with. What is the next step now?
Yeah. So I think we're starting intentionally with the individual and then going all the way to the big picture. And now you can really start to make a match in terms of what are the organizations, the job opportunities, the communities, the networks that you're looking for. Because on the one hand side, you know what you can offer. So if there is like a position in an impact enterprise, you know, like, okay, this is what I can offer. But you also have like a better sense of like, those are topics that I really care about. So I'm going to look for organizations in this field. And like, I think how it went for me is like when I got into this work, first I was like waiting for somebody else to do it. I guess like there was the sense of like, other people are going to figure out I'm not, a change maker in that sense. And then I kind of started to grow into this identity, and I was like, no, we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? Like I have a responsibility. I want to be accountable. I want to show up. And then I started to, I don't know, I have this metaphor of just shooting out arrows into the dark. Like, and in that case, like the arrows are emails or, text messages or just some research in terms of, like what kinds of communities are out there. I found some conferences, I found some movements that really resonated with me. I took some trainings of those movements. I met a lot of people. I had a lot of conversations, and in those conversations and exchanges, you learn more and more. You learn also more and more about, what is unique about your perspective, about what you're bringing into the space. And most importantly, you feel this sense of community and of belonging, because we've talked about this before. It's really not about perpetuating this savior narrative or like a narrative of control, of supremacy, of like, oh, I know how it's being done. Like, this is what, the global North has been doing, of like saying, oh, the Western science is the pinnacle of human evolution, all these weird, horrible things, and all the oppression that happens when you think like there's this kind of superiority. So instead of saying like, I'm going to go out in the world, like in the movies, the superhero movies of like, there's just a couple of people and the whole world depends on them. And if they fail, like it's going to be very bad. And like, the Star Wars Emperor is going to take over the galaxy. That's not what we're going for, right? I think we're going for a narrative where it's about creating these webs of connection of different movements and organizations working together. And the more clear you are on what you can contribute, the better you can create synergies in your team, because you don't have to handle everything, and really then to start identifying what's my role in the teams that I'm participating in, what are the networks that I'm a part of, and really kind of moving forward with that community. So I think question for you, and also then question for you if you're listening to this, what are some communities that you feel resonant with? And if you don't know any communities yet, I think it's a great starting point to just do some research and say like, hey, what are the groups in my city that work on this topic? Or there's now also a lot of groups that meet online. There's a lot of free workshops, a lot of free spaces where you can connect to, but obviously you need to be aware of it. So I think, Arya, for your case, what are some of the groups that are really resonating with you and that you want to connect to, or you've already connected to?
Yep. So my journey began probably a few years ago, maybe around 6 or so months before I left Australia back in August. And the process was quite similar to yours, the shooting the arrows in the dark. For me, what it was, I read this book called Donut Economics. I don't know if you read that. Yep. Mm-hmm. And that was actually the first book that really started to turn the cogs in my head and really get me thinking about the world and how it's structured. And so after I read that book, I felt so strongly aligned to it that I wanted to see if Melbourne was doing any work related to the donut. And so I started Googling, and immediately I found this organization called Regen Melbourne, who has been twice on this podcast now, once to discuss the donut, and then the most recent time on how to activate community participation. And they were running, it was Global Donut Day, I think within a month of me finding this. And so they were having a conference in the evening. And so I went to it. I went by myself. I didn't even meet anybody there. I was so, it was a completely different community and a completely different environment. And everybody's already working in the space. And I had to deal a lot with kind of like imposter syndrome in that moment, because it was kind of like, oh, like, what am I doing here? But I really enjoyed it. And I say all of that, but it was equally so inspiring to see hundreds of people that were interested in that. And for me, actually, that was the first time that I got a sense that there was such a big community. And I felt a lot less alone in it. Because up until that point, I mean, I have had conversations with friends who really resonate and, you know, with my family, but it still felt a bit isolated. And so in that moment, I felt, oh, what am I doing here? I don't know anybody, but look at all these amazing people. I want to get to know them. I want to be a part of this space. So that first event was where it really kicked off. And then to shorten the rest of this answer, so Regen Melbourne is an organization that I really aligned with and I built a relationship with, had them on the podcast, have built a really solid connection there. There's a few other organizations in Melbourne that I would love to connect with. One of them is Street, which is more of a social enterprise feeding the homeless. They have a bunch of cafes around. And yeah, there's a few others. So I've begun making those steps and have built some good connections. But then I left Melbourne and I've kind of put that on the back foot, but that's something that I want to lean more into as I prepare to come back home. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great to hear that you've already found, more of your people in that sense. And it's very important. Like, I can't overstate this to make sure that you don't feel alone, because I think that's where the depression comes in, the cynicism, the hopelessness, and being connected to community and having these conversations and even, grieving together and, sharing our feelings about the situation of the world is very important. And I think just a couple of things to maybe extrapolate from your story.
Mm-hmm.
One piece is that, this whole process is really like a heroine's journey, in the sense that we're called into the unknown, we're being challenged by life to make our contribution, to live more purposefully, to have a bigger impact on, our community. And then all these fears are kind of come in and things are holding us back, and like the comfort zone and so on. So in that example where you went out, you took the leap, right? You went into the unknown, and then you had this experience. You didn't meet people, but at least, you showed up and you had this experience. And I think there is always a lot of different kind of thresholds, things and challenges to overcome. And that's where, virtues come in, like courage and dedication and humility and so on, to go on this journey. And then another piece that you mentioned is like the kind of synchronicity and flow, where, you've started to look for, okay, who was focused on the donut economics. And then 1 month later, there was the gathering. And, if you're listening to this, I just want to encourage you that if you're putting your attention there of like finding community, something will happen and you're going to experience these synergies. You're going to meet other people. And like, I can promise you that, in this space, like there's a lot of people who aim to support each other. So you can also go to a gathering and say like, hey, I'm new to this, like I need more orientation and so on. So I think people normally in these movements are pretty supportive, and that's kind of like maybe another metaphor is just going through the jungle and like kind of going from the, I don't know how it's called in English, the lianes, the things that are
The
hang
vines,
down
yeah.
and kind of
Yeah.
vines, like kind of swinging from vine to vine, and you don't have to know the whole path through the forest, but you just grab one and then you swing to the other and you grab the other, and that's kind of like all the kind of chains of conversations, of moments of insights, reflections that over time are going to crystallize more and more, like what do you want to work on. And again, it can always change, it's always emergent, but I think maybe that metaphor also helps a bit in terms of finding community.
Definitely. It's a leap of faith, and again, feeling into your body and heart as to what resonates with you. There are people there that feel the same, and equally as important, to your point, that they are there to support and to hold you and to help you grow. So once I got over that initial, well, what am I doing? How to know anybody? I started to go to more workshops that Regen Melbourne was holding. Eventually I connected with people that led to some of the folks at Regen Melbourne to jump on the podcast. So I definitely started to lean in, but it definitely feels like, a swing from one vine to the next. And it's a journey, it has its ups and downs, but if you follow your heart and listen to what truly resonates with you, you're going to meet people that can help grow, shape you, help you find, your way around. So there's a lot of beautiful people doing amazing work across the world. And that sense of breaking out of that sense of isolation was very, very big for me in my journey. So yes, if anybody's looking to make the jump, there's people supporting you everywhere. You just have to go out and find them.
Yeah, and I think, that point that you're making about breaking the isolation, coming to community, that's so vital. And I think that's been one of the biggest kind of gifts in my journey of, now being in this space for so long. I've met so many amazing people from all different kinds of cultures and backgrounds, and it's really more people than you think. And I think these systems, these dominant systems that are in place, and this kind of story of separation, it's by design that it can have this kind of idea of divide and conquer, right? Like the more people are disconnected and separate from each other, the less we can build political alliances, the less we can advocate for change and so on. So I think it's also the modern maze is in many ways by design, and kind of breaking through it, going through the labyrinth, it needs, collaboration, and you don't want to be there alone. Like you want to really, hold hands and kind of go through it together. So I think that's really important. And now, we've covered these three different areas and went into a bit more nuance, but I want to bring it back again to like the bigger picture. So what we just covered now in this first episode is like the hourglass, and how we start funneling down and sifting and like the sand kind of moving to this kind of central piece. And I think we pointed to the central piece. Again, to recap, your unique contribution consists of your individual roles, skills, knowledge, and talents, applying that to a larger set of systemic issues together with other people in, your communities, your local community, global communities, and so on and so forth. So those three elements that kind of start to come together to this unique contribution. And we've gave you some pointers, throughout this episode. So I think you're more than ready to, start journaling and start exploring. And in the show notes, there's also going to be an article about this with some more guided kind of inquiry questions that you can use in your own process to really start applying this now, and not wait until, in 5 years when you're, in the job that doesn't fulfill you, but really start now and like take it into your own hands. So I think just to conclude, talking a bit about that unique contribution, I think we talked about the feeling of it, like the physical feeling, the kind of emotions that come with it. And for me, this is really it's about purpose. It's about alignment. It's about really feeling fully alive and feeling that I'm bringing all of what I am, my wholeness, and I'm bringing that into these kind of collective contexts. And it's exhilarating feeling. Of course, it's also challenging because it's not a path that anybody went before, right? Like if you create your unique and innovative way of contributing, it's not that there's like a lot of pointers that can help you. Of course, there are guides and there's podcasts like this, but in the end, it's your journey, and I think coming back to the feeling, to the body, to the sense of like all of these different threads that we've talked about, they are weaving together into this kind of coherent whole that's complex and intricate and beautiful, and that really represents you and who you want to be and how you want to show up in the world is very important. And that feeling is something that fuels me every day when I get out of bed. I feel like I'm connected to this larger stream of, moving towards where I can have a meaningful impact, where I can be connected. And I hope that this episode and what we've covered kind of supports you in kind of carving out that unique niche. And one last point, I think niche, this word is used in very capitalistic business context, right? Where it's like, oh, you just pick your niche and then you build a business and then you make a lot of money. That's not what we're talking about here. Like here, we want to widen this idea of your contribution to be also of ecological nature, of spiritual nature. It's really something that you're not just adding to human society in that sense. It's not just a stale kind of professional title or even like a career or role. It goes beyond that. It's really a kind of manifestation of who you are. And I really hope that this episode helped you to gain a bit more clarity and go into this step of really feeling inside of you, what is it that you want to offer? How do you want to be of service to the people and to the planet, so we can regenerate together and we can stop these dominant systems of oppression that create so much suffering for so many people and communities all over the world.
Powerfully said, Adrian. I got shivers a little bit, actually. Really, really beautifully well summarized and said. So this will be part one of our conversation. Maybe we could just tease a little bit what the listener can expect from our second part. So we've got the top of the hourglass. I'll include images of that as well to help visually represent what we're talking about here. So we have the top of the hourglass. We've funneled in now. We're talking about the niche. So what is it that we'll be talking about in the second part?
Yeah. So I think once you have more clarity on like, these are the ways I want to contribute, it's kind of time to start implementing it, right? Like so far, it's still more on paper. Maybe it's inside of you. Like those are some reflections of like a direction that you want to take in your life. But then we want to start of like, okay, how do we realize it? And this is where it kind of shifts a bit more from an internal challenge of, creating clarity from confusion to also becoming more of an external challenge in terms of, how do I now go into the world? Like, how do I step out? Like, what kinds of projects am I working on? How am I working on these projects in a way that aligns with my unique contribution? How do I also make an income from that? I think that's like a big pain point in this kind of whole field of change makers, is like, how do I sustain myself? How do I pay the bills? I think there's a lot of anxieties and fears around that. And then also, how did you craft a powerful message that, resonates with others, that, generates opportunities for yourself, and that's really aligned with this unique and innovative niche that you kind of carving out for yourself. So I think that's like the next part is like the bottom of the hourglass is like, we're going to look at, okay, now that you know a bit more about your unique contribution, how are you going to strategically kind of implement that in reality, and not just, again, in this individualistic way of like, I'm going to build this solo business, but in a way that's interconnected and woven together with other with other people and other communities. So it's a lot about just operationalizing. Basically, I think that's the second episode that we're going to look at.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Adrian, for the first part of our discussion here. Thank you to everybody for listening. We hope that it was insightful. If you have any questions, please reach out to myself or to Adrian. I'll provide a link to his socials as well. And we look forward to you joining us on the second part of this discussion. So thank you very much. Hope you have a beautiful day, and we'll speak to you soon. Namaste.